The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you cordless, everybody. It's Wednesday night, February 26th, 2025. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters Tonight. We've been off for 16 days. This is episode 201. We did our 200th show, and then I took 2 weeks off. Now, those of you who follow and know what's going on here. I took 2 weeks off because my mother was actually on that 200th broadcast. That was 2 Fridays ago. She called in, and we had a nice chat with her. And then the next day, or maybe it was the day after, that weekend, she fell and busted her pelvis. Now, she's 100 years old. Now, there's also another thing you have to know about my mother, too. She's built like a battleship. And I don't mean physically. She's a tiny little woman. She's even in her prime, she was only 4'11". I think she's like 4'9". Old people shrink. Hell, I'm shrinking, and not in a good way either. I'm a bad human being. You shouldn't even know me. It's like, anyway, so Mama Peters fell and busted her pelvis. And I don't know if you know anything about, it's not like busting your hip. There's nothing they can do for it. So basically, you just sit and heal for 4 to 6 weeks. That's it. But my mother, bless her heart, so I took 2 weeks off to help her out because she doesn't live here in town. She doesn't live in Minneapolis. She lives in southern Minnesota. And I went down there a few times, spent some time with her. My sister lives there, so we got it covered. But my mother, to her immense credit, she's 100 years old, and she's healing just fine. Now she's walking around. She's finally walking. After 2 weeks, she's walking without her walker. I mean, seriously, I don't know people half her age who do this well, Excuse me. So another thing I'll tell you about my family, too, is my mother's mother, my grandmother, lived to be 104. Not just that, she was healthy till 2 weeks before she passed away. She was going to the market shopping at 104. And so I guess I don't know if I have these genes. First of all, I become a big fat F, in my older age. I wasn't most of my life. I was rail, skinny, thin for most of my existence, but now I've become, that's partly, and I don't want to get into it. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining too, but it's also partly because of some medical issues I've had. And I was completely, I hit 60 and everyone says, well, now, your things are going to go to hell. And I'm thinking, I'm doing great. I'm fantastic at 60. I'm a 5 out of 5. Well, 1 year, 61, everything kind of hit the fan. But at any rate, so I don't know if that's going to be my fate or not, but whatever, do I care? I don't care at this point. I really don't care. Okay, so our guest tonight is Mark Tapscott. He's a senior congressional correspondent for the Epoch Times. I don't know if I'd say he's a regular on the show. He comes on about 3 or 4 times a year. He's been, those who are tuning in for the first time, I did a bunch of podcasts for Kong News, where I was the editor-in-chief for 4 years. So I've had there's several shows. We did radio shows at Kong News. We did podcasts. I did all that stuff. And so this is kind of an extension of that. So going back to 5-6 years, I've been doing this now. He's been on maybe a dozen times. But anyway, he's a fantastic guy. I love him. He's really knowledgeable. You'll see, well, we did the interview this afternoon, so I'm going to replay it. And you'll see that he, as I did too, called the election in November almost exactly perfectly. It's amazing. And my first question to him is, how come the Democrats are so clueless about getting it wrong? We have a nice conversation. I also have to warn you, we had some technical issues in the middle of that. The inner tube, and you got all that stuff. But that's kind of, you guys know, this is, my problem, if I have a problem here, is I come from traditional broadcasting. And, first of all, I'm doing this on a shoestring budget. So I got a background here. I got bumpers, I got intros, I got theme music, I got all this stuff. And I don't understand people who do this like more for a living. On like cable news services and stuff, who tune in from their home, and they're getting paid $500,000 a year, and their picture looks like crap. I don't understand this. Put $15 into it, and it doesn't cost much. It doesn't. I mean, no, I used to use a green screen here, and then I discovered the beauties of NVIDIA graphic chips, and so we put some chips on the computer, and now green screen's gone. Don't need to use it anymore. We got literally AI takes care of this. But I mean, this is not. I'm not. I mean, you can do this for hundreds of dollars, not thousands, hundreds. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm complaining. And why am I complaining? Oh, because I like to bitch and moan? Is that the reason? What was my point? My point is I come from broadcasting. And so I finally, after 200 shows, I've finally gotten used to the fact that this is a way, way more casual medium. And it is, and it probably should be too, So, I mean, I'm trying to filter myself. I like to swear. And you can't swear on the radio, or you can't swear on TV. Well, you can't. Yeah, technically, you can at cable, but no one will let you. So I don't know. Anyway, Mark's coming on. I do have a couple announcements I want to make here. So we are first of all, we are we're transitioning to some new stuff, and I don't have the I can't tell you about it all yet, but I'm going to tell you one thing right now, because it's going to start. It's starting today, and that is, as of this moment, we are no longer going to do shows where we don't have a guest. I mean, I was trying to do shows Monday through Thursday, and we posted just for a couple weeks last month. We said we're going to do them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's out. We're doing it Monday through Thursday, but I'm not guaranteeing the fact we're going to be on every night. And if we don't have a guest, we're not coming on. I'm not going to do any solo shows anymore. I don't. I'll be perfectly blunt. I don't think I'm that good at it. It's like, you don't want. I'm not going to waste your time with my babbling crap. I'm pretty good at talking to people. I know that. That seems to be the forte here. And so if we don't have a guest, I'm not going to do a show. So that said, we got a guest tonight. Tomorrow night, Murray Sabrin, economist extraordinaire, also regular attendee of this program. He's going to be joining us. Tuesday night, we have a new guest, Marcus Loth. He's the editor-in-chief of the UFO Insight website. We're going to be talking about UFOs. I dearly miss Jazz Shaw, who passed away in October. He was our UFO guy here, our go-to guy. And so I don't know if Marcus is going to end up filling this role here too. Never talked to him before. Looking forward to it. He does, just like Jazz, he writes for a lot of other different publications. Matter of fact, Jazz used to write for mysteriousuniverse.org. And Marcus has a very nice article up there just today. And so I'm looking forward to talking to him. That's Tuesday of next week. So we have no show on Monday. Okay. And Wednesday, Jeff Meyer joins us for his monthly visit. He's the CEO and publisher of Calling News. So, and going forward from here. So I'm kind of getting my mojo back here. I have to say, it was kind of, not it was good that my mother got hurt, not at all. But I was able to use this time the last couple of weeks. I'll be honest, I'm kind of getting my shit back together, So, after the holidays and stuff, and you don't want to know. At any rate, yeah. So we're plowing forward here. Yeah. So no more shows if we don't have guests. The other thing is, and we're going to start this, I think, next week. And I'll post this on our website, jimandnight.com, if and when we do. Well, we're going to start it. And so it's just a question of when. I think we're going to start next week. We're going to try doing this show for at least a couple weeks, an hour earlier. So we'll be starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, an hour earlier. I just want to see what's going to happen. We've never done that early before. And one of the reasons, and it's probably stupid, but the show's called Jim and Night, and Jim Peters and Night, and it's at 5 p.m. on the West Coast. It's not exactly night. Now we do have viewers all over the world. The reason I mentioned Singapore And Sydney, when at our intro at the top, is that we have people in Singapore and Sydney that watch the show, and they get back to me regularly. Well, actually, I don't know if Sydney, it's Australia, So, and Sydney's one of the two major cities, so we went with that. So we're going to try that starting next week. So we'll be on at 8 p.m. Eastern. That'll be 7 p.m. Central. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to get like a little, the vast majority of people watch this on demand. We do not have a big viewership live, and I want to see if that's going to change. And speaking of that, so after, if you're not familiar with the show, never seen it before, we have the show's basically in two parts. We're going to do our interview here in a few minutes. Interview's about 30, 35 minutes long. And then part two of the show, I talk about the weird, wacky UFO and paranormal and medical news. We had some legitimate medical news tonight too. I try to come up stuff that you don't hear anywhere else. And so for that part, we take phone calls. And matter of fact, let me actually put the phone call banner on the screen here. There we go. You can call in. Our number is 325-225-5546. Or if you need to remember that, it's 325 call Jim. That's the number. And you can also call when we're not on the air and leave a voicemail. You got 2 minutes. And if you do that, I'd appreciate it, because if they're entertaining, I'll play them, and especially because you're on the phone, you can't show me your naughty parts. Now, we used to, when we started the show in 93, Talkers Magazine, the Bible of talk media in the United States, they ran an article about the fact that we were apparently the very first talk show in America to let people call in on video. And we did that for a long time, for about a year and a half. And I canned it, mostly because very few people actually used it. We had very few video phone calls. We got way, way more audio phone calls. I'd say it was 10 to 1, easy, if not more. But I'm thinking about it. I think we're going to reinstate that shortly. So, so you can call in with your camera. And so, yeah, that'll be interesting if we do that. So, yeah, so that's what we got going on here. I'm going through my list. I'm checking it twice. Yeah, tomorrow night, Murray Sabrin. Tuesday, Marcus Loth. And here's for a word from our sponsor, Kong News. And then we'll come back with our interview with Mark Tapscott. Joining us from the Congressional newsroom for the Epoch Times. Are you? You're in what? Are you in the executive office building? Where are you then, Mark?
Oh no, we're on the Senate side of Capitol Hill at 101 Constitution Avenue, actually.
Yeah, getting it done for the Epoch Times. Mark Tapscott joins us now. Mark, the last time we talked, it was about 3 or 4 days before the election, and you and I put in our predictions on that broadcast. And we were both almost exactly right. Wow. It was like Really amazing. Here's my first question to you, because I've been wondering, this is not a loaded question. I actually want to know what you think. How come the Democrats got this so unbelievably wrong? Why, like, I don't understand. I don't think I'm any genius here. And no offense, you're a brilliant guy, but I don't know if you're a genius level either, you know?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, we've all heard the phrase being blinded by ideology. I think it's pretty clearly, um, for some reason, the Democrats got it in their head that most Americans would support things like requiring schools to um, um, have sex education for fifth graders. You know, that kind of approach to public policy. And that, boy, talk about a miscalculation. And that's just one very tiny example of so many that we could go into. I think they you know, in a sense, they kind of read their own news releases and believed them. And you know, it's like James Carville a couple of days before the election, he predicted in the New York Times, said he had absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Harris was going to win. Well, let's see what happens. What happened?
It's funny you should bring this up, because I was just thinking about this, believe it or not, in the shower today. But Donald Trump is many things, and you could say he's arrogant, and you could say he's an egomaniac, and maybe you could even say he's a narcissist. But I do not think he buys his own press. I don't think he does.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
He's, I have to give him credit, and I have to, anytime I talk about Donald Trump, I have to preface it with number one, in fact, I'm a journalist, but even more important, before I became a journalist, I worked for President Ronald Reagan for 6 years in the government, and I was very proud of that fact. And he's still up on a pedestal, at least in my judgment.
A lot of other people too.
Yeah. So, you know, and I have to say that Trump's personality certainly provides a vivid contrast to Ronald Reagan's. The way that Trump goes about business is also in vivid contrast to Reagan. But we have to acknowledge the fact Donald Trump cut more, and this is just in his first time around, he cut more unnecessary federal regulation than Reagan did in 8 years.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. So, you know, like the man or not, he gets results, and he really clearly put the 4 years between 2020 and January 20th, 2025 to very good use, because, boy, they didn't just hit the ground running, they were flying.
Isn't it ironic? In some ways, in many ways, this 4-year break basically helped him. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, you couldn't really script this any better. And so
No.
I just read somebody say the other day that the only thing Biden will be remembered for is being in the middle of Trump's 2 terms, which I
That's
find.
true. That's probably true. And if you think about it, I don't remember where I read this, but I read it recently. Somebody that is very smart and understanding about these things pointed out that if Trump had actually won in 2020, that his ability to get things done in the second term, you know, is very likely he wouldn't have been able to accomplish anything.
That's right.
So here we go. He's off and running.
Well, so let me ask you point blank. How do you think Trump compares to Reagan? I mean, it's obvious we have a consequential presidency here, for good or bad.
I think that maybe that's a good question. And maybe the historical analogy would be between, I don't know, Andrew Jackson and maybe Thomas Jefferson. Not that Ronald Reagan, I'm not putting him on an equal footing with Thomas Jefferson in terms of Jefferson's importance to the revolution and the founding and all. But Jefferson was certainly a vivid contrast in terms of his personal demeanor and the way he talked with friends and opponents in politics. Tremendous contrast with Trump and with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was very blunt.
Yeah.
He did not beat around the bush. He told you what he thought, and he meant what he said. And I think there's a parallel there between Trump and Andrew
That
Jackson.
comparison's been made many times. I mean, and also from what I understand, Jackson also was not well liked by a lot of people too.
Not well liked by a lot of people in Washington. That's very true. We had an establishment here even that early in our history.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? So now we have surveys now that say that the vast majority of the public, in some cases even 70 to 80%, support what Trump is doing. And yet, Mark, I find this really fascinating. A slight majority of people still say personally they don't like him. And I personally think that's actually kind of healthy. You know, you don't have to like a guy to admit he's doing a good job, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's I covered a hearing this morning on the House side that supposedly the point of the hearing was to look at the many ways that millions and millions of U.S. tax dollars have been sent to terrorist groups, including Hamas and Hezbollah and Al Qaeda, by U.S. aid. And they knew that's what they were doing at the time, and they kept doing it. So the Republicans on the committee, they brought up example after example after example of that kind of stuff. The Democrats on the committee, all they wanted to talk about was, Elon Musk. Trump is, he's the orange-haired bad guy. Elon Musk is the billionaire bad guy. And, even if you think that they're right in those portrayals, those characterizations, that doesn't come to grips with the issue at hand, which is the American people are sick and tired of sending their money, for example, to Guatemala to pay for sex change operations for one. That's not what foreign aid is supposed to do. But the Democrats in this hearing this morning wouldn't engage with that issue. And I think as long as they have that problem of being unable to engage with the facts, they're going to have a hard time winning elections.
For damn sure. I mean, the way this is going, like they'll never win an election ever again. I mean, I know that's not true, but still, I mean, it's like, so I'm reading your articles from the last 3 days, and like most Americans, I'm following what's going on here. Everyone knows the government wastes money, but my God, the stupid stuff and the amounts are just mind-boggling. And this, and you wrote about this. I can't remember if this was your piece today or yesterday, so forgive me. You wrote about the fact that at USAID, they wanted to come in and do some audit, and the director refused. And finally, they let some congressmen or people see the documents, but they had to go into a skiff, even though nothing here is classified.
None of it was classified. And what is that? Senator Joni Ernst? She's the chairman of the Senate Doge Caucus, and she, just as a footnote to all of this, she's very intelligent, and she very smartly hired a couple of Senator Tom Coburn's former staffers, people who know how to dig out the waste. They were the people that found the bridge to nowhere, if you may recall.
Yeah.
But her staff investigators were doing everything they could to get USAID to let them come over there and just sit down and look at the documents. They're from Congress. Congress has oversight, but they wouldn't do it. And finally, they did allow it. But as you pointed out, they had to do it in a skiff. And when they got there, they've got these stacks of documents, and not one of them was classified.
And let's point out to the viewers, if you don't know what a skiff is, it stands for Secured compartmentalized information facility. It's a
Exactly.
secure room, basically. And
Yeah.
generally, that's where you look at classified documents. Nothing
Yeah.
here was classified.
Yeah.
I
A
just
ship
found it,
has iron walls and a iron
yeah,
ceiling, so
you
nobody can
can't,
listen to you.
right. You can't get a radio signal in and out, none of
Yeah.
that crap. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And generally, you can't bring your phone, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, are you as well as you as a person? Are you as taken back as I am by the amount of money here that's flown around? I mean, it's like, like 10, 20, $100 million is like nothing. And I understand that in the grand scheme of the American budget, it's kind of like, 1/100th of 1%. I understand that. But when you talk about the average person in America making $65,000 a year, it's very difficult to listen to this shit.
Absolutely. And particularly in contrast to the fact that the average career civil servant makes a salary of $106,000 per year. That's quite a contrast between what the average American has to do to maintain a standard of living and what federal employees do.
Yeah.
And the federal employees do it with tax money taken from the average Americans. So, that's a fundamental fact that, again, I think the Democrats are just don't get.
So I've been in the entertainment business my whole life. I've been fired at least a dozen times. I've lost count.
I've been fired a couple of times.
Yeah, and I'm really starting to resent both in the major media. And when I mean major media, I'm talking about the people on television who generally are making $1 million salaries, and also these civil servants, about the fact that apparently they think being fired is like the end of the world for everybody. And I'm sorry, I can't relate. I can't. And
I suspect that 90% of the people that see or hear the sob stories that the mainstream media is producing as fast as they can. They find some single mother with 2 kids, and she just lost her job, doesn't know what she's going to do. And, we all, hope that she is able to like other single moms with 2 kids who didn't work for the government and lost their jobs. They find a way to make it. You always hope that people can do that, and we all do what we can to help them when we can. But when you have thousands and thousands of these folks in the government who act like, not only is it they can't be fired, but you can't question even what they do.
yeah,
That's the founders, if they were around, if Jefferson and Washington and John Adams were around, they'd start a new revolution, I think.
oh yeah, you're right. I mean, this is Tea Party stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
and so I don't really can you explain this to me? I guess I kind of understand how a federal judge can stop something the president wants to do, but what are there, 1,600 federal judges or something everywhere? And
Yeah.
I don't understand how one in some Podunk County somewhere, in some little state, can turn around and tell the president he can't do something. Can you explain this to me and the public?
I'll tell you, Jim, I'm not an attorney, and I haven't covered the courts except incidentally a couple of times over the years. But I do know this: there is a growing controversy in the court system and in the legal world over the constitutionality of a single district federal judge being able to issue an injunction that covers the entire nation. And I have a feeling that there's going to be litigation that goes probably all the way to the Supreme Court before it's resolved. And when it is resolved, there's going to be some limits placed on that. And don't forget, Congress establishes the jurisdiction for every federal court under the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, so that can't be changed. But all the rest of them, Congress says, okay, you can do these and you can do these, but you can't do those cases.
I didn't know that. So thank
Yes.
you for pointing that out. I thought the Supreme Court actually set that agenda for
No.
the lower courts. It doesn't, huh?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's
The founders, if you think about it, that fact and the fact that the Senate has to confirm most of the president's major appointments, and most importantly, Congress has to originate all spending and has oversight authority over the executive branch. The founders clearly intended for the legislative branch of the three to be the most powerful. And if Congress has a united political will, they have the tools under the Constitution to force either the president or the Supreme Court to do what they say.
Mark, I have an obscure question here.
Yeah.
I was talking to Tim Conaway, one of my regulars here on the program, and he actually ran for president for a little bit of a while, and him and I were talking about this, and I don't know if he actually knew the answer either. I understand that Congress does appropriate the monies and spending. Does that mean, like, for example, the president is the chief executive of the country? Does that mean that he has to spend it?
That's a great question, and it gets right to the impoundment issue, which is front and center in Congress right now. You recall, Jim, I'm sure, Richard Nixon did a bunch of stuff. He refused to spend money that a Democratic Congress had appropriated. And the Watergate class in Congress in 1974 passed the Impoundment Act, which basically says the president has to spend the money if the Congress appropriates it. Well, that's what the law says. And yes, the president is the manager, the guy who runs the executive branch. But that's qualified, at least in my view, as a non-legal journalist or scholar. The Constitution says the president oversees the administration of the law. That's not the same thing as making decisions about how much to spend on what. I think there's a distinction to be made there, and I'm sure Trump is going to push as hard as he can to get to restore an impoundment power, but I have some real doubts about that. I'm not sure that's constitutional.
Huh. That's really interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so let's move on to the Ukraine situation. So I live in one of the three most liberal congressional districts in the United States. All my friends are liberals, and even my friends that aren't, the Republicans, most of them also hate Trump. They're Trump haters. So I'm kind of out in the woods. But I'm bringing this up because this is the feedback I'm getting by a lot of people I associate with. A friend of mine told me the other day that she was pissed as hell about the fact that basically Trump was siding with Ukraine. And the way I look at this, yeah, well, that's the thing. It's the same thing. I don't understand. Well, she's saying, well, the thing is, Putin's going to come out of this with something. But I mean, life isn't fair. I mean, so I'm just going to delineate this. So you have three choices. You either keep on going the way you're going, and we spend a boatload of money, and Russia eventually wins because there's no way in hell. I mean, I have to say the Ukrainians have done a great job defending their country. Fantastic. Putin honestly thought this was going to be over in 2 weeks. It's been 3 years. Yeah. So yeah, good, kudos to them. But no, at some point Russia will win. So you got that, or we can actually send in troops. Then you have World War III, or we simply negotiate a position where, from what I understand right now, in terms of landmass, the Russians basically have roughly 10% of control of Ukraine, that we give them some of that and call it a day. And I don't see any other alternative. I mean, is there one? Am I missing something here?
One of the things that has fascinated me about the current Ukrainian crisis is everybody seems to forget.
Mark, I'm going to ask you to start over because you dropped out there. Did we lose you? Mark, can you hear me? All right, we have neither.
Video.
Oh man. Oh, we lost you altogether, Mark. Can you come back on? Okay, you're back, and you look terrific again. So, you heard my question, right?
Yes, about Ukraine.
Yeah.
One of the things that has fascinated me about the current Ukraine crisis is the fact that everybody seems to forget that in 2014, which wasn't that long ago, Russia went into Ukraine and took over uh, a good part of the land that they have now
Right.
in Ukraine.
Crimea, basically,
Yeah,
right?
Crimea and a little bit more.
And
Um,
forgive me, and you have to clarify this. From what I understand, I don't know a lot about this. A lot of people think that Crimea kind of sort of was part of Russia already, right? In other words,
you know,
was that
now
am I
people have been arguing about that for a lot longer than you and I have been around.
yeah,
Uh,
right, right.
I'd say probably the Crimea has been under Russian control for a long time. We'll put it
Uh-huh.
that way.
Okay.
Um, but people forget that Russia has had that presence for years. It didn't just start 3 years ago when they invaded the rest of Ukraine. I think your point about there's only three ways basically that this thing could come out could end is very accurate. The interesting thing and this is a great illustration, I think, of Trump thinking out of the box, as the cliche goes. He's approaching it not as a military strategic puzzle. He seems to me to be approaching it as an economic puzzle. If you can find a way both to repay what we've given the Ukrainians, $350 billion worth of stuff, do it in such a way that sets Ukraine up to be genuine.
Mark, we're losing you again. Sorry.
Are we still going?
The intertube is not blessing us today.
I must be bored with what I'm saying.
I don't know. I don't think so. Anyway, I think we lost you when you were talking about the three alternatives I mentioned. So after
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, you had mentioned that there were basically only three ways that this thing could end. Trump has approached it outside the box, not as a military challenge or a military puzzle, but as an economic, political puzzle. And his proposal that, the Ukrainians agree to give us all of the economic access to the rare minerals and so forth. I think that's a really interesting way to go about it because it gives the Ukraine um, a hope that they really can get peace and then have a genuine partner in economic
yeah,
reconstruction.
right,
And to be mutually beneficial to us and Ukraine.
right.
That's an interesting way to look at how to resolve what might otherwise just seem to be, the big giant is kicking the crap out of the little guy.
Yeah, I would almost say it's brilliant myself, but it's like I don't know. What do I know? I'm just sitting there talking on the inner tube. So, you know. All right. So, okay. So, what else was I going to ask you? This is a good way to kill time. Fantastic, Jim. Good, brilliant.
No, you're doing great.
Oh, thank you. You flatter me. So, what do you think is going to happen here in the next few months?
There are predictions you probably heard from Mr. Carville, etc. I don't think that's going to be.
All right, you dropped out there again, Mark. Sorry.
I think the Trump people are flying high, and they're going to continue to fly high. They're going to have some setbacks. They're going to make mistakes. But come November 2026, I think the Republicans are going to be in great shape.
Yeah. Oh, this is what I was gonna ask you, and this is kind of off topic, but not really. This whole thing about selling these gold cards. Now, this is a really interesting idea. So he wants to sell. Basically, he wants to sell citizenship to
Yeah.
non-citizens for $5 million a pop. Now, he says he thinks he can get 1 million people to buy this. I don't know if he can get 1 million people, but it is an awfully interesting way to raise money. And also, I mean, if you don't vet people, there's a lot of evil people in the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
$5 million.
Absolutely.
I mean, shit.
I cannot imagine that the Treasury Secretary would sign off on that without, some pretty tough screening of the people that are buying.
Yeah, but 5 million times 1 million people is $50 trillion. And that would pay off the entire debt.
There you go.
It's an interesting idea, I mean, you're right. He's really good at thinking outside the box. Totally.
Yeah.
What do you think this guy's legacy is going to be? I mean, you're good at predicting the future. You've done it a couple times.
I don't think he's going to accomplish everything that he wants to or hopes to. I think he's going to accomplish a lot of it. I think there are going to be years from now, we're going to look back and say, boy, he really screwed up on that one. I wish he had done that differently. But overall, I think, he's probably going to be one of the we look back on and say, it's a good thing he came along when he did.
Well, just based on his personality and the way things go, it's almost inevitable something's going to screw up majorly. I mean, it just is. That's why I look at this, I mean, no one's going to get up and bat 1,000 every single damn time. It's just not going to happen,
No, batting 300 in this town is all but impossible.
Yeah, right. That's right. And also the other thing, I have a hard time with people, I mean, okay, so the guy's got some personal faults. Maybe they're major. But you look at all the major leaders we've had that people look positively the possible exception might be Reagan, but all of them seem to be seriously flawed individuals. And we were talking about Reagan before, and I have to bring this up to you. And I can't remember, you told me in the past when exactly you started working on Capitol Hill. So, but okay. So here's my deal. As a young person, I didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. And so I was a general supporter of Reagan. I voted for him. And I thought, well, okay, this is going well. He seems to be good at this. But I kind of admit, I always questioned the guy's intelligence until Mark, his wife, and I think it was posthumous, I'm not sure, put out that book of his letters, which I read. And she put it out specifically to show how bright he was, how smart he was. And I read that book and I agreed. It's like, oh my God, this guy was he was a man who was not beholden or enamored by intellectualism per se. But he was a very, very smart guy. And that book, I thought, accomplished its purpose. So
I agree. Reagan was, before he got involved in politics in 1964, the Goldwater campaign, he spent a lot of time over a long period of time reading, Adam Smith, reading Milton Friedman, reading Ludwig von Mises on bureaucracy. He understood things that most of us, if we had to sit through a classroom on them, would just find boring. He understood them, and he figured out how to talk about them in a way that people like us could relate to. That was a powerful combination.
Did you actually work with him personally?
Yeah, well, not nearly as much as I'd like to have, but I had my moments.
Yeah. Was he the same in private as he looked like as he appeared in public?
Yeah. Yeah, he was.
I had Jeff Shepard on the show, and he worked with Nixon, and he told me that although Nixon was a cordial guy in private, there was no personal talk whatsoever. It was strictly business,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he said he didn't
Well,
mind that at all. Go ahead.
business with Reagan was cordial, intelligent, and moving forward. If you weren't accomplishing something in a conversation, he could diplomatically bring it to a close and move on to something else. And you weren't insulted by that.
Yeah. As the comedians say, this story has grown tiresome.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm always
he was a great man. I have to say that of my long career, the 6 years that I worked for Ronald Reagan, I'm most proud of.
That's pretty cool. Getting back to what we were talking about, just other leaders. I mean, you look at FDR, especially Clinton. I have to admit, I'm a huge Clinton fan, even though I'm not much of a Democrat anymore. But still, I thought he did a fantastic job. But these men were all highly flawed. I mean, Clinton had problems. FDR had his problems. They were mostly hidden at the time, but he had them. It's like, and
let me give you an example that you'll appreciate. In the Reagan administration, we reduced the federal workforce by about 100,000 positions. You know how many Bill Clinton reduced it by?
No.
300,000.
And in the Reagan administration, now, right now, my understanding is non-military, there's about 4 million people that work for the federal government. What was it then? Do you know?
No, I don't think it's 4 million. If you count the state employees that are funded by the federal government, yeah.
Okay.
The federal workforce is about 2.3 million.
2.3. All right. Good to know.
It was 2.1 when Reagan came in, and it was 2 when he went out.
And what about Clinton? A little more? Or?
Clinton, it had creeped back up under Bush 1. And then you may recall Al Gore, the guy that invented the internet, the inner tubes. He had a reinventing government initiative that actually accomplished some very good things.
Did you know Bush at all?
Jimmy Carter accomplished some good things. The Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 and the Inspectors General Act of 1978. Those were both Jimmy Carter's.
Carter was an interesting guy because in some ways he fell into the problems he had, but in other, and tell me if you agree with this. On other ways too, he had spectacularly bad judgment, and some of those things kind of went together, and it's like it would not make for a good mix, But you are right. I mean, I have Murray Sabrin on the show. Remember, he's coming on tomorrow, economist, and he has said, that Carter does not get credit for reducing regulation in government because he assumed he was getting reelected. So he started doing it late in his term, and then basically kind of Reagan ended up benefiting from that, but I don't know. And then on top of that, now I'm doing all the talking. Sorry, Mark. On top of that, so, you look at trickle down economics. I'm curious to see what you think of this. Trickle down economics, I would say, people say it was kind of a failure, and in some ways it was, but it took about 10 years to kick in, and then Clinton's sitting there, and it kicked in, and then Clinton had the wisdom to let it ride, and I don't know if a lot of Democrats would have done that. He did nothing, and he benefited from it, but he deliberately did nothing, the way I look at it anyway, or basically what I know. Is that true?
Well, he was smart enough to look at the growth in government revenue under Reagan because of the tax cuts. He was, he did have a tax increase in his first year. Yeah, and it didn't work out very well, and it led to the contract with America and the first Republican Congress in 40 years.
Right.
And boy, he got the message. You'll recall from his State of the Union message after that, the era of big government is over.
Very good impersonation.
Yeah, he understood.
Yeah, he did. He did. He was
And,
very
and
good.
that's what Democrats are not doing today. They don't have that understanding that reality wins every time.
Yeah, but would you agree with me, Mark? If Bill Clinton came on the scene today, he would not be. He basically wouldn't be in the Democratic Party. He wouldn't.
No,
It's
no,
terrible. I just
yeah,
find it awful. But you know what? Whatever. You
yeah.
know.
He would have a hard time finding a place.
Yeah, Mark. I thought I told you I'd leave you to 35 minutes, and we hit it. So I appreciate it. I really
Well,
always a pleasure talking to you.
you know what our problem is, Jim? You
What's
and I
that?
could talk to each other for hours.
Oh, I know. I know. That's why I like having you on the show, Mark.
Well, you get two old guys together, they like to
Yeah,
talk,
that's right. That's right. That's right. I keep telling you, next time I come to Washington, I haven't been to Washington in a while. Next time
I
I
hope.
do, we're gonna go to the Capitol Grill and have a drink or something. I don't know. You
You
know,
got it.
I hope
You
so.
got it.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.
All righty, we'll do it again.
Yeah, we will. We will. You take care. All right. That was Mark Tapscott, congressional correspondent, the senior congressional correspondent for the Epoch Times. Great guy. Fantastic. Very knowledgeable. Love talking to him. And he's right. We're just two old guys on the tube talking to each other, you know. All right, so now you can call in 325 call Jim 325-225-5546. You can also send me a text message at 408-458-5088, and I am making arrangements here to actually maybe read the chat uh, uh, streams that are going on the I understand. I'm an old fogey. I didn't want to do this. I know this is how this works. So most people, actually read the chat streams while they're on the tube while they're talking. And I thought, well, whatever. I don't know. I might start doing it. Whatever. This is your part to call in, though. This is a part where we talk about the wild and wacky UFO, paranormal, medical news. But before we do that tonight, I got to make an announcement here, or I have to tell you if you didn't hear this, and that is Clint Hill, who was one of the bodyguards, one of the Secret Service people on John F. Kennedy's limo detail in Dallas when he got shot on November 22nd, 1963, passed away on Friday. He was 93. He is, if you've ever seen the Zapruder film, he's the guy who crawls up on the back hood of the limousine, where it's tragic but terrible. Mrs. Kennedy is actually on the trunk of the limousine trying to scoop up her husband's brains, and that's him that's crawling that's trying to get her back into the car. He had a very interesting life. He was actually there that day. His job was to protect Mrs. Kennedy, not the president. That was his actual assignment. He was assigned to Mrs. Kennedy, and he said in 1975, well over 10 years after the assassination, he did an interview with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. And he said if he had reacted a half a second earlier, he would have taken the third bullet that blew up Kennedy's head. He said and Wallace asked him point blank, "You would have been okay with that?" And he said, "Yeah." Yeah, he said that was my job, and he felt bad about it for the longest time. Matter of fact, he quit the force. He quit the Secret Service because he became so depressed he couldn't function anymore. And ironically, he said in retrospect that it was that interview with Wallace that kind of started him toward healing. And he basically did get his life back together, but he took it really really hard. Anyway, he passed away in 1993 on Friday. I haven't done enough shows on the Kennedy assassination. I want to do more. I have a very detailed theory, and I've gone through it a couple times on the show in the last 2 shows about what happened in Dallas that day. I basically buy the fact that James Files, a convicted mob member, was actually the guy who pulled the trigger from the grassy knoll who and blew up Kennedy's head. And the reason I buy it is partly because, and hardly anyone ever mentions this, there's actual physical evidence that he did it in terms of a spent bullet cartridge that was found there at the scene. And it fits in with his story, and the cartridge wasn't found until after he told it. So, and the other thing is, we know for a fact Lee Harvey Oswald was definitely involved in this. There's no doubt at all. Files himself says that. He says that he was one of the CIA liaison guy for the whole thing. It's a very very complex story. I don't know if I want to get into it now, but there's no actual evidence that Oswald was in the window in the sixth floor depository actually with a rifle. There's no evidence he did that. He probably brought the rifle into the building. There's that. And we know he was there. He worked there. And 1 minute after the assassination, he was in the break room on the second floor drinking a Coke. And that's one of the other reasons there's a good possibility he wasn't actually a shooter, is because it would have, some journalists figured out you could run from the sixth floor to the second floor break room in a minute. You could have done it. But you would have had to run at breakneck speed. And apparently he was just very calm. He was sitting there. He was seen by several people, including a couple of policemen, right after the shooting. There was obviously somebody shooting from the sixth floor depository. Files says that his boss, Chuck Nicoletti, who worked for the Chicago mob, according to this story, the Chicago mob was hired by the CIA to do this. Now, that's a standard procedure, because what you don't know, you never guess it now, because I don't think they care anymore. But the CIA could not function on American soil. They were simply a foreign intelligence gathering agency. So if they ever had to do anything on American soil, they usually hired the mob. That was a standard thing, and from what I understand, and maybe it still is. Chuck Nicoletti was in the Dell Tex building, which is kitty corner on Elm Street from the Texas School Book Depository. In other words, they triangulated the shooting, which is the way you do that if you're going to do it. And everyone says, the standard line is that Oswald did it alone, and that's what the Warren Commission found out. But totally everybody forgets that they redid that commission in 1978. And in 1978, that commission determined that it was a conspiracy, that there was more than one shooter. So that's what I think too. Anyway, Cliff Hill, rest in peace, man. Okay, another thing that made the news this week that you probably didn't see is Megyn Kelly, the podcaster and the famous former Fox News talk show host. She claims now that she got autoimmune disorder from one of the Pfizer vaccines for COVID. And she says her doctor, this hasn't been absolutely confirmed, but her personal doctor says that's the likelihood that she did. And that's what she says too. She's not actually claiming this outright, but she's claiming that's a likelihood. And then on top of that, a bunch of scientists have concluded also that have evidence that those vaccines cause chronic health problems in a small number of people. And this is really interesting too. This has been going on like forever, 30, 40 years. People have been claiming that kids are getting autism from vaccines, right? And there's a zillion studies that have been done that say this isn't true. And it's a vaccine one vaccine in particular. I can't remember what it is. Is it smallpox or TB or any rate? And this makes a lot of sense. Now, you know, people said that all the scientific evidence says this isn't true. However, I actually put a lot of credence in anecdotal reports, especially if there's a lot of them. If there's a few of them, well, shit, people are crazy, you know. But if there's a lot of them, and there have been a lot of them over Jenny McCarthy, apparently the celebrity, she's been on this for years and years about the fact that she said her son went to school one day and got a vaccine and came home that night. It was not only was a different person, but it was never been the same since. Literally in an afternoon, his personality changed. And so you wonder, she's not the only person who said this. So this just came out, and I don't have anything. This is off the top of my head. I don't have anything to actually quote to you per se. But a study came out a couple weeks ago that said the problem maybe isn't that in other words, the actual research has been done is actually true, but that's not the problem. The problem is it might be two or more vaccines mixed together and their reaction to it. Like, for example, when was in school 50 years ago, yes, I am that old. When I went to school 50 years ago, students got 3 vaccines on an annual basis. Now it's 11. That's the standard in most grade schools in the United States. It's 11. And the thought now is that there's some combination of these vaccines that might be causing autism. And probably don't have to tell you this. You know this. Autism is through the roof in the United States. It was like in 50 years ago, it was like 1 out of every 100,000 kids or something. Now it's like 1 out of every 1,500. I mean, it's just shot up just like 1,000% plus. It's unbelievable. And it's hard to imagine that that's some sort of genetic thing. At some point you have to say, well, something in the environment is causing this. And, it could be plastic. I mean, they're finding out we have a whole bunch of microplastics in our brain and all sort of crap, all that sort of stuff. And who knows, but this is a valid theory anyway about the fact that it might be a combination because they never test for that. They're never testing for a combination of vaccines. They're only testing the individual vaccines. Does this give you autism? Well, comes back a zillion times. No, they do it over and over again. No, but they never test about putting vaccines together. So if you're getting 11 vaccines on an annual basis, well, maybe, and my theory about the COVID vaccine specifically is my personal theory. And I don't know. So I don't have the problem with the original vaccines per se as so much as the booster shots. So, I'm a scientist guy, I'm a science guy, and I am not anti-vax. I'm not. Anyway, so Warp Speed comes along, and January 21, I very proudly and I get my Moderna COVID vaccine. I go get it, 2 shots, right? 2 shots over a 2-week period. Okay, that's cool. I got my vaccine. Terrific. I'm good. About 3 months later, they're saying, well, now you need a booster shot. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm 65 years old. I've never had to have more than 2 shots for any vaccine in a calendar year ever in my entire life. And I just happen to have a doctor's appointment scheduled, and I go to my doctor, and I won't name her, which is terrible because she's brilliant. And because she's brilliant, she's deluged with business too. So she probably doesn't need me helping her out. I mean, I'm amazed by this woman. She has at least 200 patients. She remembers what I got going on. I mean, and also because of my heart condition, I see her about every 6 months. She remembers from the last meeting. I don't remember from the last meeting. I don't remember what happened 6 months ago. She remembers, and I've called her on this. I said, "How do you do this?" And she smiles. She's brilliant, brilliant. That's what it is. Anyway, Laura, I'm talking to Laura. I said, Laura, I don't understand. They're saying you need a booster shot. That doesn't make any sense to me. I've never had to have one before. And she says to me, well, Jim, we're wondering the same thing. And I'm thinking, well, my doctor doesn't understand what's going on here. We're all screwed. That's what I'm thinking. So I didn't get any booster shots. I didn't. And I got COVID. I got COVID well after the pandemic passed. I got it really bad for about 12 hours. And I was really, really sick for about a half a day. And it's like I went to sleep that night, woke up, I felt fine. I don't know I know what is with I've been like this all my life. I heal very, very quickly. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah. So, what was I going to say about the COVID thing? Any rate, it probably wasn't important, was it? Okay, well, on other medical news too, they're starting to find out that there's now a theory floating around that Alzheimer's and dementia in older people is not so much caused by, but exacerbated by a lack of B12 in your system. That's vitamin B12. And the theory here is that what's now considered a normal amount of vitamin D under the current guidelines is woefully inadequate. In other words, the guidelines are wrong. They're starting to think that. Yeah, the studies point to this. I'm reading about doctors who are saying the same thing. You know, that you probably now I take well, I'm a terrible human being because I take supplements up the wazoo, and I think it really helps me. But I take a super B complex vitamin not every day, but regularly, 2, 3, 4 times a week, like pretty much every other day. And you should too. And they're not expensive. You know, you can find them. You know, I just looked. My Super B complex has I think 1,000 milligrams of B12. Excuse me, of B12 in it. You can call me up. 325 call Jim. There you go. And yeah, you should do that too. Yeah, easy for me to say. I got friends who think I'm crazy, I'm nuts, you know, but I don't know. I think these, especially I take a lot of amino acids, and I think it really helps me. I really do. Because I can tell when they're gone, you know. All right, another thing I want to show you here. I mean, I got a picture I want to show you too. Look at this. This is off the front of. This is from the aname. Oh frick. Anomalian. There, I got it. Anomalian.com website. It's a website about UFOs. So that thing you see, I can't use my cursor because you can't see it. What the hell? You see that big blue dot in the middle of the picture there? This is on Mars, and that thing apparently crashed. And because you can see, it's in a crater, and as far as anybody, it looks metallic and it looks round. And people are wondering what this is. Now, you know, the government, of course, and skeptics are always saying, well, you know, it's the discoloration from the angle of the sun, all that rot, you know, it's just another meteor. No, I don't think so. And I'm not the only person who's thinking this. It looks metallic. It does not, you don't see blue stuff. You don't see blue asteroids. You don't. And it's round. It's perfectly round, you know? And look at the crater it's made. I mean, it's obvious. You can tell which way it came in, you know? Anyway, yeah, this was just discovered 2 weeks ago on a regular flyby from one of NASA's Martian probes, and it wasn't there before then. You know, they're mapping this thing regularly, and it was in 2 weeks it was not there, and then it appeared and it crashed. So it's something crashed, you know. I'm looking forward to, like I said, on Tuesday, Marcus Loth, who is the editor in chief of US UFO Insight magazine on the web. He's going to be joining us. He's a UFO guy. I'm looking forward to talking to him. There's a lot of stories, a lot of stuff. It is amazing. I mean, and especially now that everybody has a camera. But the problem with that too is some of these videos are so bad. I mean, you know, okay, you got lights in the sky. So I have to tell you about this. I read a book, and I really recommend this book, and I should post this on our show blog too. The book is by a guy named Patrick Jackson, and it's called Quantum Paranormal. And he's got a really, really interesting theory. And you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with UFOs? But just bear with me for a second. So his theory is that, you know, all these haunted houses and all this paranormal activity people find in these buildings and stuff, it's not caused by ghosts, spirits, any of that sort of stuff. It's actually caused by alien probes, because he's talking about, and of course everyone else is talking about, because the government has acknowledged Sean Kirkpatrick at the anomalous UFO office. He's acknowledged these things are flying all over the place. They don't know what they are. There's a video of the one in Iraq flying around it. There's these little spherical silver orbs that appear to be metallic, and they're about the size of a bowling ball, basically, and they're flying all over the place, right? So his theory is that these things actually end up residing in buildings. And the reason they're actually programmed to do some of the scary stuff to keep people away from them, because they emit a lot of radiation. and they can hurt people. And so, so this is a giant like cover up by the aliens to basically, they want to get information on humans, but they don't want to hurt anybody. So he said they actually do this stuff on purpose just to spook people out. And he says these things stay in buildings or congregate in them because buildings can shield the public from radiation too. It's like, and so it's a I mean, he's an IT guy by profession. And so he basically decided to reverse engineer this phenomena. And if you read this, it's like I plowed through this book in a day, even though it's about 400 pages. It was absolutely fascinating, and I have to tell you, it's a little bit complex in terms of the science involved here. There's no formulas or anything like that. But he goes about it from a really technical standpoint, and he makes a really good case for the fact that no, that and his I personally don't think all these hauntings are that, because I mean, hell, my 100-year-old mother, my father passed away in 1989, and she said there's 2 instances in her condo where she saw at night where she saw my father walk down the hall to go to the bathroom, and he's dead. And I know my mother. I know she's not bullshitting. I know that. So, I mean, I do think there's something going on there regarding that too. But and so that's kind of a separate issue. In other words, I don't think it's an either or thing here, but he thinks a lot of these supposed hauntings are caused by these orbs. He also has put the other thing where there's actually 3 types of orbs. They're done by size, and they're in 3 different levels of the atmosphere, and they're basically all networked. So and he explains this too. This is the single most, although he almost walked over this. This is the single most fascinating thing about his whole discussion. And he thinks that the current aliens that are running this network stumbled into it. He thinks they didn't start it. It was there, and they basically revived it. That's what he thinks, based on the evidence he has. And it's just a fascinating theory, and it makes an enormous amount of sense. Because seriously, if you have that type of technology, why the hell would you send people? You wouldn't. You just want it. Even these things, the Tic Tac things that are flying around, that the Nimitz. And I should tell you, there's a documentary on Amazon Prime called The Nimitz Encounters. It's only 35 minutes long. It's very, very short, but it's really well done. That says in very precise detail what happened on the Nimitz in 2004 regarding those flying objects. I don't think there's anybody inside of those either. I think they're probes. People say, well, people couldn't humans couldn't withstand the sort of G forces. There's nobody in there. And also the other thing is too, and if you understand this, the way these things would fly, they would basically be in a cocoon of a force field, and because of that, technically, they're from a very technical basis, they're not moving, even though they're flying fast as hell. Inside, they're not moving. So that, it's been pointed out that if that's the science that's going on here, there'd be no G forces inside anyway. But even that said, there's nobody in there. No, I have maintained, and I still do, that the most, if not all, of the stuff that the military is seeing regarding this are probably ours. I think the government has reverse engineered some of this stuff, and they're testing it out. And who better to test it out on a P than professional pilots, professional observers? Even though people said, "Well, you're actually putting people in danger," and you are. But I think the military just trusts their people to take care of themselves. I mean, David Fravor, one of the pilots, he said these things flew within like 30 feet of his aircraft. It's like, at 24,000 miles an hour. It's scary as hell. And he's right. They're right. That's the reason, if for no other reason, the government should be paying attention to this, because there's a danger to our military for that reason. You can't have stuff flying by at 24,000 miles an hour, 30 feet away from your plane. You can't. That's BS. That's crap. What else we got here? I'm going to finish this off here. Oh, yeah. And finally, we'll end with this. If you don't want to call me, screw you. And that is, there's more stuff coming out of the Vatican that the Vatican knows way more about alien life, extraterrestrial life, than they let on. And this is about people who've been in the Vatican archives. Now, which used to be called, the actual technical name for them was the Vatican Secret Archives. Pope Francis a couple years ago renamed it because he said it sounded too creepy and it sounded too conspiratorial. So he renamed it to the Vatican Apostolic Archives. But the fact of the matter is they are secret. There's huge libraries inside the Vatican in the basement that go on forever with papers in them, literally going back 2,000 years. And there's a lot of people who think the Vatican's actually have proof of alien life somewhere down there. And I would say a reason to think that is because during Pope Benedictine's uh, uh, tenure before Pope Francis, the Vatican Observatory, there's two Vatican observatories. One's actually on the Vatican grounds in Vatican City, and then there's one on the coast in Italy. And I can't remember what the name of that is. Two fairly large, but by modern standards, not huge telescopes, but they still use them. And they have professional astronomers. They actually have priests, cardinals that are professional astronomers. They have these things. And one of those professional astronomers, out of the clear blue, gave an interview to the Vatican newspaper, which is called, what is it called, the Papal Observer or something like that, about the fact, talking about the fact that there could be alien life, and there was no reason for this. And then right after that, the Vatican had a seminar or a gathering to discuss with people in the church, what happens if they discover alien life. And there was no trigger for this at all. And people are starting to wonder what it seems. The impression is that the Vatican is actually basically kind of trying to cover their bases ahead of time, because a lot of people think that the discovery of extraterrestrial life, intelligent life, would destroy religion on the planet Earth. I don't think that myself. I don't. And the Vatican they're going through to great lengths to try to tell people that's not true. Obviously they don't want to lose their grift. Excuse me if I just insulted you if you're Catholic. Yeah. But that, I think that's a really valid point. Just because, Jesus didn't live on other planets doesn't mean he wasn't worthy or whatever, however you want to put it. I mean, we can discuss that for half an hour too. But yeah, there might be something going on there. They don't let a lot of people into the Vatican archives. You have to be quite well vetted to actually go down there. You can't take anything out. You gotta look at it. Where you find it. First of all, you got to find it. I have no idea how they catalog this stuff. I don't. Technically, they have records going back to the 15th century, but people have said they actually have papers going back way before that. Basically, around or just after the time of Christ. So anyway, yeah, so they got it going on. They're taking care of business. And their business is to confirm to the faithful that salvation is real and that the aliens won't have anything to do with it either way. I don't know if that's true. I just don't. I don't. There's a lot of the talk right now. There's a lot of people thinking that Trump is going to end up with doing the disclosure thing because he likes attention and he knows how to do it. Yeah, and he does. He does. It's like we were talking with Mark earlier. This thing about this gold card idea, so that you sell citizenship to people outside of the United States for $5 million a pop. And they think they can get 1 million people to sign up for this. Now there's quite a lot of people on the planet who have $5 million to spare. I don't know if it's 1 million. I don't know if 1 million would do it. But if you got even 500,000 people to do it, there's the country's worth $37 trillion in debt. If you got half a million people to buy a $5 million gold card, that would take out most of that debt, not all of it. And the thing is, we don't need to get rid of all of it. It's just that it's become to the point where it's highly unmanageable. At this point, it's going to bankrupt the country. I want to point this out again. We pointed this out before. The interest on the national debt is now way more than the entire GDP of the United States. I think it's about 125%. And that's way more than our single biggest line item, and that is the Defense Department. We pay more in interest. That interest passed $1 trillion this last year. We pay $1 trillion a year on the national debt. And I think our entire federal budget's only like $4.7 trillion. So yeah, about 20% of it goes to manage his debt. It's nuts, and it's the highest it's ever been, including World War II. So even we can make a good dent in it. Now, my boyfriend Bill O'Reilly, he has also said too that if if we licensed the the Arctic wildlife reserves, if we licensed for oil drilling up there, if we put all the money from those licensing fees into the national debt, we could wipe out between those two things. You can completely get rid of it. You could. So I don't know, but and I'm sure Trump's aware of that. Anyway, he likes to do things outside the box. He likes things that get attention. It's wouldn't it be him that would um want to tell the public that the aliens are here, so and that's one of the one of the things I want to accomplish with this show is I want you to understand, and you can call me crazy and I do not care at all. The aliens are here. You have to wrap your mind around that. So just going forward. I don't know if this is going to end up being, I might die before this becomes official or that becomes common knowledge. But I'm positive of it at this point. There's just too much stuff going on. So I want to thank you folks for watching tonight. I want to thank Mark Tapscott for joining us. Always a pleasure. A fantastic guy. Tomorrow night, Murray Sabrin, economist extraordinaire. So I specifically want to talk to Murray about the fact that, well, first of all, he wrote a Substack column, and then there's a couple of things that happened in the news regarding constitutional this stuff with Doge and how this affects the economy and budgetary things with the government. And that's what we're going to talk to him about. And then Tuesday, Marcus Loth comes on from UFOinsight.com, and that'll be fun too. I want to thank you folks for watching. I really appreciate it. We love doing this stuff. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everyone.